And we are good to go. Well, let's introduce ourselves. I'm joined by Dr. Greg Moody. You're our interesting anomaly, a rocket scientist, psychologist, martial arts master, and business consultant. And I was having a conversation, I think, behind your back the other day about who's ever heard of somebody both having a background in engineering and psychology. Those are like opposite ends of the poles, aren't they?
Yeah, that does seem to kind of be my life. I end up having opposite ends of the spectrum of just about everything. Yeah. Uh,
Opposite day. And I am Stephen Oliver, and we work with financial advisors all over the place, certainly all over North America, and have been high level coaches and consultants for small business owners, agents, and so forth for, God, I don't know. I'm at 30 some years. You're at what, 15, 20 years
yep.
at this stage. And I kind of got my start doing internet marketing back when, one of the big steps was writing several books on internet marketing back in 1999. And then that's kind of become your niche is working on SEO, pay-per-click, um, uh, uh, private publishing, book authorship, as well as a number of other things. But what our subject matter today, which I dubbed generally was prospecting sucks. But more to the point, I think that, and Greg, you've heard this story, but I'll make you suffer through it for the purpose of this call. Back when I started my first business in 1983, one of the books that I had read as I was prepping for that was a book called Positioning: The Power for Your Mind, and it was, that there was another one called Megatrends that I had gone through thoroughly as well. But the positioning book was all about how in all of your marketing you've always got to be positioning yourself in the right place in the marketplace. And again, this is a book that's coming up on 41, 42 years old. So at the time it was talking about, when IBM launched the PC and how the Mac was positioning itself. And then of course you had the eternal Hertz versus Avis battles, that type of stuff. But I've always thought it's a really important perspective. I was having a conversation with one of the marketing gurus, Jay Abraham, who's worked with Tony Robbins in one thing or another. In fact, it was a small private meeting with Jay and with Dan Kennedy. You remember that one I think it was 5 or 10 of us there with Jay and Dan. It was a really interesting conversation. But one of the conversations that they were talking about, and we were talking to Jay about, is just how important it is to position yourself. Right? Jay was talking about, he's got to be positioned as the guy who's a $5,000 an hour coach. Dan Kennedy charges a tick under $20,000, I think, for a day of his time. In fact, Dan Kennedy was talking about why he started flying private, and what he said was, well, it's really interesting. When somebody wants me to do a consulting day for them, they tended to want me to come to them, but as soon as I said, well, it's going to be, 25,000 round trip for the Learjet, for the charter, and then 20,000 for the day, all of a sudden they came to him, and his whole point was he didn't want to travel. But that
that's a good
position,
example. Yeah, but that's a good example of positioning right there, just so everybody
exactly,
sees. It's
yeah.
congruent with what you're saying.
Well, that's why I brought it up exactly,
Yeah.
because and Jay Abraham was talking about how, if you're going to be the guru, every metaphor of the guru is the guru's at the top of the hill and you got to climb the mountain to get to the guru, right? If the guru is sitting on the steps in front of your house and is free, and you don't have to go through any pain or turmoil to get to the guru, the level that you value the guru is pretty limited. You and I have joked about friends and family and associates of, the worst advice ever is free because they don't value it and they don't do anything with it, right? But what we see all the time is financial advisors doing a horrible job positioning themselves. So what you want, and that's why we talk about things like a book, about being niche specific, and about standard or typical direct response marketing type of marketing, is you want to position yourself as the expert. I was just mentioning, Greg, I've got I've had Fox News on all day today, and just about every day on Fox or CNBC or on Bloomberg, Ken Fisher's on all the time. and he was the longest running columnist for Forbes magazine, among other things. But every TV appearance, he's positioned himself as the expert, right? And what we see most often is the opposite, right? Is how do advisors get new clients? The old days was you're sitting in a boiler room at on Wall Street or whatever. You're making 150 calls a day, and you're talking to people who don't know you and they didn't want to talk to you, dialing for dollars, and then trying to convince them that you know what you're talking about and trying to pitch them something, right? And then that shifted to cold email, which of course is pretty worthless anymore. And then it shifted to, I'm doing in messages on LinkedIn. So, I'm cold contacting people, hoping some of them will respond where they're interested. Well, I got to tell you, if somebody just shows up on my doorstep, trying to put their foot in the door, I don't view them as the guru on the top of the mountain, right? And what I do is I view them as a commodity, somebody who has probably the same service as everybody else. Doesn't mean you can't cold contact somebody and then shift the dynamic, but it's really hard to do, right?
Or at worst, you see them as a nuisance.
Right.
Which is I think where a lot of the marketing, I think people feel like for them to get to their clients, they've got to be a nuisance to most and a mediocre to most of them. And maybe once in a while, somebody will think that they're an expert, but why? And you said it really well a bunch of times. It doesn't matter, you have an MBA, have a PhD, but it doesn't matter how many letters are after your name, unless there's a reason for somebody to pay attention to you as the guru. There's not real, you're going to look like everybody else. You can say CFP or you're an RIA or you're whatever. If you just look, there's a lot of other people that look just like you. Yeah. You have to somehow be different, and that's part of positioning. And you have to be important. That's part of positioning.
And to position yourself as the guru, you want to be hard to get to, or perceived to be hard to get to. You want to have your time blocked rather than they can just pick up the phone and contact you anytime they want. You want to put your requirements on them of what to do, not you. They just tell you what to do and you're a functionary, right? So you don't want to be an order taker. You don't want to just be a functionary for them. But more importantly, I think let's talk about, the prospecting sucks piece of it is the standard direct response type of marketing that we teach people to do, right? Is you run an ad on Facebook, you do a piece of direct mail, you run an ad in a newspaper, you run an ad on TV, you've got a talk show on TV, or you have an ad running on LinkedIn. All of them have the same purpose, which is to get somebody to raise their hand, right? And typically it's going to be a drive to an offer such as for a free copy of my book on blank, for a free copy of our special white paper on the new tax law, for a special, a copy of our free report on blank. It's going to be something where it's either free or paid, but you're getting them to raise their hand that they're interested in your topic of expertise, right? That's what we use things like books for very effectively. I've got a whole shelf full of the stuff that we've done. But you're running an ad somewhere, maybe it's an ad on LinkedIn, but the call to action is raise your hand if you'd like this book. Raise your hand if you'd like this report. Raise your hand if you'd like to participate in this webinar. Raise your hand if you'd like to participate in a small Zoom meeting. Raise your hand, right? You can go on and on that list. And then what you get is you get somebody to raise their hand, and metaphorically, because what they do is they either pick up the phone or they fill out a form. When they fill out the form, we get qualifying information, screen them, and then the ones that qualify for what we're looking for, we continue to educate them. And then we move them to the next step of them scheduling an appointment to meet with. And my preference is they meet with a screener. We don't call them a screener, but they meet with somebody who's going to see if they qualify. They're going to do, I'll talk about it later, Dr. Hoffman, they're going to build you up, which is, again, the first place you want to have somebody as staff is somebody to screen and schedule appointments for you, right? So they build you up. They educate the person about how valuable your time is, how knowledgeable you are, and then you move them to that next step. What would you add to that?
Yeah, and I think that people might get confused with, we want to make it hard for them, but we also want to make it easy to start down the path to get to you. We
Right.
want to make it really for your particular niche.
Right.
And for whatever your niche is that you want to market to, and sometimes people are a little too broad there. They say we want to, market to everybody. But let's say we
Anybody 50 to 60 who has half a million or more.
right, exactly. Or sometimes I want to market to everybody. I want to work with everybody, and that's kind of a non-starter. You'll have some trouble with that. But let's say we that's not our topic for today. But we want to make it easy for them to start down the path to get to you. But as they move down the path, they're going to be more and more and more intrigued by working with you, and they have to go through some hoops to get to you. Those hoops are going to be compelling and interesting hoops, so that as they move down the path, by the time they get to you, they're going to be super excited. They're going to be pre-qualified. They're going to be educated. They're going to be really easy to work with, and it's going to make you look like somebody of value and somebody that has authority. Because who else would you want working or helping you with your money? You don't want somebody helping you with your money that's just like everybody else, because then they might as well just walk into an Edward Jones or walk into a Fidelity. There's a Fidelity building over here next to me. They might as well walk in somewhere.
Or they just might as well robo-advisor it and
Well,
have.
exactly. Do it themselves. Why shouldn't they just do it themselves? I mean, what difference does it make? You can do it. There's plenty of TV ads. I mean, they can do it, on their phone. Why should they walk anywhere? So why should they talk to you versus somebody else? We want to make it compelling that you're different, and that this is a way to do that. Otherwise, you're going to be just like everybody else, and basically you're nobody then.
Yeah.
And that's what we generally see is, I want to get more traffic, and the traffic is just this spread of nobody. And, we talked to one guy, I remember, who was trying to get leads, and he was literally doing Facebook ads, giving out, and this wasn't even the plate liquor kind of steak dinner thing. He was literally giving out coupons for stuff, like I think it was for a meal or for something, but there was actually no connection to what his product was. They would get a coupon for something. That was his qualification. They didn't go to the event. They didn't go to the event and hear from him. He would just then call them because they responded to his ad. There's no connection there to the marketing, or to some moving up the path towards him being a guru. It was just
Unrelated bribe.
it was an unrelated bribe, and it was just insane. So there's so much disconnected marketing happening that doesn't move them along this certain path. So I think there can be some confusion about, well, I'm giving them something for free. Isn't that, how does this work, and how does this connect along this path to them being a guru? All this stuff works together.
This is not specific to this industry, but in the movie theaters and at the airports for a while, there was a company, and I forget what they did, but what they'd do is they'd put a motorcycle out there with a lead box.
Yeah.
And it was, enter this drawing to win this motorcycle. And when I saw it, I thought, well, okay, that's interesting. Is this, we have a number of motorcycle dealers around the area. I assumed it was, Honda or Harley or somebody, driving into a dealership. It had nothing to do with the motorcycle, right? It was, I filled out the deal trying to figure out what their marketing thing was. It was, I think, a windows company, a blinds company or something. And I'm looking at that going, what does this possibly have to do with the logical connection, right? I understand exactly what you're saying. It's just crazy. You always want, what they're raising their hand for is to express interest in what you're an expert at, right? And then share with them elements of your expertise. Now, what we will typically do for an advisor is things like, help them co-author a book, help them put together their own book as one step of that expertise, maybe a series of reports. And frankly, it can be, as we just did, you create the book and then you chunk out all the chapters as special reports. And now we got, 5 reports in a book. And, do you want this report? And the next offer is this report, next offer is this report, and then it's the book. And then oftentimes what I mentioned, Dan Kennedy, what, in their realm would be called a shock and awe box. But really, it's just a package that builds credibility for you and your company, right? And it could be 3 levels. I mean, it could be building credibility for you, building company for the RIA that you're working with, and building credibility for whoever you're, if you're working with LPL or you're working with Schwab or whatever, the higher level is building credibility for all of that. But what gets missed is the individual advisors aren't doing a good job of differentiating themselves. It's just everybody is look-alike, and they're not doing a good job of doing anything. I keep hearing people repeat back the number of 10 3 1. 10 people who I get hold of who express an interest. 3 of them I have conversations with. 1 of them myself. Well, our closing ratios tend to be more like 80%. But the reason they're 80% is by the time they get to the advisor, they've had a whole bunch of different steps. They already have a level of reverence. They have a little level of respect. They've already convinced that you know what they're talking about. And frankly, they're working a little hard to get to you, as opposed to you're begging them for their business.
Well, I think and we also want them to, the message speaks to them.
Yeah.
Because it's going to speak to them in their niche that they're working with. It's just not you happen to be smart and that's the end of it. It's going to be connected to what they probably want to. You're one of them.
Right. Yeah. So again, I mean, think of the two concepts that may seem distinctly different, but they're not. One is positioning. You want to be the guru at the top of the mountain that is perceived to be hard to get to, that they have to jump through hoops to get to. To get to that level of expectation is giving them books, reports, access to webinars, access to recordings. All of that is helpful, and for 2 reasons. Because when it's in your voice, especially if it's video or audio, is they start to get a sense of you. They start to get a level of rapport. And again, we have videos that 1,000 people have seen it, and that when we ever talk to them face to face, they go, "Oh, I feel like I know you already. I've been listening to you, and I know about your quirks and different things." Well, that's by design. It's a matter of building that relationship, but also setting it on a pedestal so that they see expertise. The other side of the prospecting thing is, it's again, to me, it's an anomaly, because it really feels like we're in an industry where most everybody has been set up to fail. And so you were talking about that a minute ago of, a company that recruits a whole bunch of engineers.
Yeah.
And then I don't know what the failure rate in that case. A couple of big companies I work with, do a ton of really effective college recruiting. But my guesstimate is, their failure rate is at least 29 out of 30, and probably more like 97 out of 100 that never make it past the second year. Just a super high attrition rate. Hell, your odds of getting in the Navy SEALs are higher than making it as an advisor. You know that article I showed you just recently, Bank of America. They were trying to solve their attrition rate by making their processes dumber. Rather than making their marketing better. Remember that?
Yeah, that's exactly wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to make it where people who are less competent succeed more often. But what you do want to do is what you should do, and again, very few of the companies do this. The big companies really should be doing direct response marketing and then feeding their advisors traffic. And pretty much anybody you work with, if you're watching this, you probably have no support in that direction, because that fits the vast majority of the industry. And by the way, their marketing department tends to be. Remember, we had this conversation about one of the magazines. The big company's marketing department tends to be fairly recent college graduates who got a bachelor's degree in marketing. Greg, from our experience, what does a 27-year-old who is trying to market to 50-year-olds with $1 million or more in the bank, what do they know about marketing if they came out with 120 credit hours, from Northwestern or wherever in marketing?
Yeah, just about zero.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say it differently. I would say they know things that are counterproductive,
Right?
That are going to use up a lot of money and end up getting them nowhere, unfortunately. And that really is tragic.
Well, I'm going to butcher it. That old Mark Twain quote is one of my favorites, and it's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just isn't true that
Yeah.
gets you in trouble,
But you
right?
know for certain it's just not true. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And I did my MBA and had most of it be focused on marketing. And in this case, I had a professor who was great. He was a venture capitalist. He had been involved in the Coors Silver Bullet campaign and passport radar detectors and one thing or another. But still, the academic foundation of marketing is not out in the out with your up to your up to your neck in alligators trying to make a sale, right? Is I don't trust anybody marketing who hasn't been belly to belly, face to face making sales and isn't being held accountable for generating leads and generating appointments. And again, you can go through the marketing department of almost all these companies, and the people who are doing the marketing are doing image advertising. They're not doing direct response. And frankly, then they become the gatekeeper for what the advisors can do. And then the same person vetoes all the stuff that would work well, which is the other irony of it is you end up, Bill Glazier, Dan Kennedy's partner for many years, he used to call it the sales prevention department.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. But anyway, we'll wrap up here pretty quickly, but the starting point is always looking at who you want to target and then getting out of cold prospecting, because cold prospecting only sets you up for positioning yourself as not very special, not hard to get to, not certainly doesn't set you up as the expert. What we want to do is flip it, where we're doing community marketing or referral marketing, host parasite marketing, circle of influence marketing, to use a different term, where either we have a perceived expert who's putting us on the pedestal and telling them that we're the expert, and then getting a way for us to raise our hand. Talk about Dan. I was listening to him with an advisor recently, somebody that we know. Is he had gotten with a gentleman who was like we are with various niches, but he was an expert to dentists, teaching dentists how to maximize their practice. Ended up on the dentist podcast, and then ended up in front of the dentist clientele. So he ended up as a speaker for a live event, 500 dentists live, 500 of them on video, and ended up on the podcast. Between that, he got 2,500 of them to raise their hand, asking for his book on investment, right? And really, it was the same book he had already put together that he'd been using for years. He just changed the title, from retirees to dentist, right? And they raised their hand for his book. He got 2,500 to raise their hand, and in the first month, he added 25 million in assets under management. And plus, that was from of the 2,500, I think that was out of 40 of the dentist. And so he's got another 2,455 dentists to work with, right? And I'm not recommending that your niche be dentist. There's a lot of different niches that are productive, but it's this case. It was a host parasite relationship where somebody was convinced of his capability, and he was able to leapfrog off the list. And that makes all the difference in the world. Imagine if he had cold contacted 30,000 dentists and gotten a few of them to raise his hand. His closing rate would have been nearly as much. Plus, probably would have cost him $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 to make the sale if he was doing it from advertising, rather than it's like that in that kind of host parasite situation.
Yeah, and that's important to anchor in. I mean, there's a massive difference between having some authority and not, and that authority doesn't two things. One is the authority makes a difference, but the second is to create authority doesn't take a lot.
No,
it doesn't take a lot. It would take in the circle of influence marketing. We hear people trying to do that a lot, but usually it's something super lame, like in lame marketing is what we should do a podcast on lame marketing. That would be our next title. But it's something.
Well, that could be 20 hours of content.
Exactly, because we end up with this circle of influence marketing. A lot of people will talk to, oh yeah, I'm doing that, but it means they become friends with an accountant or a lawyer and tell their accountant or lawyer to let other people know about them as an advisor.
You give
But
them a stack of
accountants,
business cards.
yeah, and accountants and lawyers are notoriously bad at marketing their own damn businesses. So they just happen to make a lot of money per client. So they don't need to be that good at marketing their businesses to make it okay living. They should be much better at marketing their businesses, but they suck. So what happens is that is not effective or lucrative circle of influence marketing. It needs to be done much better, and there's multiple ways to do that so that you can be seen as an authority. All it takes to be an authority really is somebody saying, hey, you're really good, and in front of a group, and that makes you an authority. That's a simple example, and there's many, many, many more ways to do that. So and I think for a lot of people also listening to this podcast, you might be a single person in your small operation. Maybe you just got started, and you may be thinking, well, I can't do that. I know these guys are saying that, but that's for the bigger guys or the ones that have a lot of experience or the ones that this. You start where you're at. You can see examples just all over the board of people that are successful, and they were all exactly where you were at one point. They just made a decision that I'm going to, in Zig Ziglar's words, I like, tell the truth in advance
Oh yeah.
or act the truth in advance. You just start with one thing that we're talking about, and then do that one and do the next one and do the next one. That's how you grow it up. You don't have to be the top advisor in your group. You don't have to have a lot of people in your circle. You don't have to do any of that stuff to get movement going with all of these activities.
Or you've got you've got 30 years experience. That was one of our guys used that as an example. Well, I've only been doing this for a year. When I've been doing this for 5 or 10 years, and I have that on my resume, then I'll do this stuff. It's like no.
Yeah, no. That's ridiculous. That's just never going to be the way to get started. Now, there's a couple of things that being around for a while. Of course, if you've got 1,000 clients in your database and you're moving from insurance to advisor, asset management, yeah, then it's a little different. We have some different strategies to work with you on. So there are some differences, but there's tons and tons of stuff you can do if you just are starting out. If you're by yourself and you don't have any staff, and no problem. I mean, it's really not a problem. Most of these things are absolutely applicable for you.
Yeah. Well, let me give you an example. You were talking about the circle of influence thing a minute ago. I mentioned Jay Abraham, and the first time I ever worked with Jay Abraham, I forget, it's probably 25 years ago now, maybe more, but myself and all my friends were on Tony Robbins' list, and Jay Abraham did a host parasite relationship with Tony Robbins. So I got a package in the mail from Tony Robbins with back then a audio cassette in it and a cover letter. And the cover letter was from Tony Robbins talking about, here's the guy that's done all my marketing. I think you should listen to him. And we're doing a special thing for all of my clients. I think it'd be worthwhile for you. And then there was, I think it was an 18 or 24 page sales letter along with an audio cassette that was an audio cassette of Tony interviewing Jay. And I went to a seminar in LA with him, and he explained the whole process. And by the way, the seminar I went to, he had 400 people who paid $5,000 a piece, to sit in a room for the weekend. But see, that's the type of thing is we'll often create. Here's the cover letter from a CPA. Of course, we'll write it and get him to approve it. It's on their letterhead. Here's a copy of your report. Here's a copy of your book. Here's a copy of something else. Maybe it's a copy of a report. And if they raise their hand, you'll give them a copy of the book and a copy of several other things. Maybe that then leads to a podcast or a webinar that the CPA is going to participate with you. And then he's interviewing you as the expert in your field, and then you give them a chance to raise their hand, for some other free gift, and that leads to them scheduling an appointment with you. There's, the stepwise process. The example I used a minute ago was, here he's on this meeting with the gentleman who had a bunch of dentists that follow him, and the gentleman's interviewing this advisor as the expert, and the call to action was, if you want a copy of my book free, raise your hand and we'll give it to you, and that. That paid for itself in the first month, and then he's got enough prospects to probably work the rest of his life, to tell you the truth, if he does a good job on that, much less everything else that comes out of it. But
yeah, absolutely.
Greg, let's summarize, because we're about out of time. Is The worst position in the world to be in is you're doing cold outbound phone calling, you're doing cold outbound LinkedIn messaging, you're doing cold outbound email, and you're being perceived as a pest. And it puts you in the situation of you're the same as everybody else. The better position to be in is you're the guru on the top of the mountain, that they have to work their way to get there. But the way you get to be that guru in their eyes is reports, webinar, video, podcast, local or national TV appearance, taking somebody who already has a relationship and an expert relationship with an audience and having them say that you're an expert. And that can be as simple as, the local Porsche dealer was one of the ones that we did with one of our clients. Is it can be as simple as something like that, or it can be somebody who's a coach for neurosurgeons, doctors, general contractors, etc., and getting on top of their relationship, or having doctor, lawyer, accountant, lawyer. The thing you said a minute ago can't be emphasized enough. The number of lawyers who are good at selling themselves, much less any other people, could probably be, counted on one page in the country. And the same thing is true of CPAs. So you've got to do it for them, not expect them to pitch you.
Well, the authority building isn't because you've got more letters behind your name, and it isn't because you've been in the business 30 years, and it isn't because you're whatever. There's nothing because you've already got enough of it now. It's because you're doing these other things on the list and getting in front of people that matters. And we've got more on the list that you can do, but that's what matters. Yeah. It's like a lot of people would like to be the best, I don't know, whatever, gymnastics instructor, but the best gymnastics instructor in the world's probably in a cave somewhere and nobody knows about him. But whoever is the best is probably doing the best to market themselves. Yeah. And there's a lot of it. There's examples of that everywhere in the world. You're not going to be the best. People aren't just going to come to you because you're the best. You have to show that you're the best authority by these other pieces.
Well, you could go through the list. Does anybody think Dr. Phil is the best psychologist?
Yeah, that's for sure. That's not true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sue Zorman. Do you want Sue Zorman and God, what's the other guy's name? It slips my mind at the time. Do you want any of the or the Mad Money guy? Jim Cramer. You don't want any of those guys actually managing your money. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. But they've positioned themselves where they have a huge following, and they've put themselves on a pedestal, and they're creating seven-figure, 8-figure incomes from doing that. And it's true in every when I was first years ago when I was first working with Tony Robbins, I was doing a lot of neuro-linguistic programming training. Everybody in the neuro-linguistic programming community hated Tony. But they hated Tony because he was bringing in more revenue than all of them combined, probably times 10, right? And they were busy telling everybody how he wasn't really as good as he, claimed to be in one thing or another. And the funny thing was, if you said in any of his seminars, he didn't claim to be the expert. And in fact, he hired experts to do it. What he was good at is ready, take action, and then figure out how to get people in his pipeline, starting with the infomercial and working his way through a lot of other things. Anyway, let's call it a day on that. It was great to have you, Dr. Moody. And
yes, sir.
Hopefully everybody listening got some value here.
All right, everybody, take some action.